Hello, and welcome back to Go With The Flow. I'm your host, Shannon, and today we're going to be discussing the writing process as a whole and how that differs between disciplines. With finals week rapidly approaching, we thought it would be beneficial to our listeners to hear some advice on the writing process from not only one of our graduate assistants at the Writing Center, but also two of our professors here at Lewis. Today I'm joined by Dr. Philippian and Dr. Kozminski, and again, one of our Writing Center GAs, Chris. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves by letting us know, for our professors, what they teach and where their area of expertise falls. And for Chris and myself, we'll share our majors and how long we've been working at the Writing Center. So I'll start, and as I said, my name is Shannon. I'm an English and secondary education major, and I've been working at the Writing Center for 3 semesters now. Dr. Philippian, why don't you go next?
Okay, well, happy holidays to everybody, and thanks for inviting me to join you. So my area of research is primarily Shakespeare, but also early modern British literature more broadly. But you might be wondering, well, what do you say about Shakespeare? What is it that you research in that field? And primarily, I research representations of disability on the early modern stage, particularly representations of what we call early modern neurodivergence. So that has taken up my time since 2010. Yeah, when I first kind of segued into that subfield.
Okay, Dr. Kozminski, why don't you go ahead next?
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. I'm Dr. Kozminski. I'm chair of the physics department, and my areas of research lie primarily in air quality and climate vulnerability, and I also do some work in physics education research. Even though my background is in high-energy physics, I worked at Fermilab for a while, and then kind of transitioned into my current areas of focus.
Okay, and finally, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. If you've seen one of the podcasts before, you'd know I'm been at the Writing Center for about a year, and I'm also working under Dr. Koz for some of his air quality research.
Okay, amazing. So once again, our goal today is to show students that writing looks different for everyone, but is always a process. So first things first, and this is a question for everyone. So, Dr. Kozminski, why don't you begin? Do you enjoy writing? Is it something you find yourself able to do with ease, or is it something you dread the process of?
I enjoy writing if it's going well, but it can be very stressful at times. So, no, I do enjoy getting into the flow and writing, but the process can be challenging to get started at times or kind of frame things exactly the way you want to tell the story in science.
I think I feel really similar. It's something I enjoy if it's going well. If it's not, it's so difficult, but I think that's how a lot of people feel. Dr. Philippian, do you have anything to add to that or your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, a blinking cursor is intimidating. Blank page is a challenge, no question about it. When I sit down and realize that cursor's been blinking a little too long, I think maybe I'm not ready to say what maybe somebody's asked me to say, for publication. And I need to do a little bit more reading around and try to get in my mind before I start writing some sense of opening sentences, where I'm going to go. But I do enjoy the process of writing quite a lot. And my habit is typically to sit down and say what I want to say about the poem or the play or the cultural dynamic that's at work in the poem or play. And then I will search around for the research that more or less helps me kind of flesh out the notes. But I try to begin with my own voice and go from there.
Right. So I also find the cursor intimidating, but for me, I'll just take a step back, because if I stare at a computer for an hour and I don't have anything down, I know that moment is not the moment I'm going to get that done. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, for generally the writing process for physics specifically, if I'm writing on research, sometimes it'll be a bit more difficult to, get the intro and everything going. So sometimes I'll just work from what I have, the data that I have, and just analyze that, and that makes the whole process go by a bit faster,
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next segment, getting started with your writing process. So our first question is, how do you personally get started on a writing project? And Chris, I want you to take that one first.
Okay, I mean, I kind of already sort of took a poke at that already. So essentially, when I start off like in the writing process, I just start with what I have. So I go and I arrange it and I organize it, and I make sure that when I actually start writing, I kind of have an idea of what's going to go on the page before I've even started writing it. That way the writing process kind of seems more enjoyable, and I have more motivation to do it because I'm not stuck.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's like a lot of steps before actual writing begins. So I think that's definitely something to take into consideration, especially because I know a lot of classes require longer papers for finals. So I think it's important to make sure you're taking the time to actually know what you're going to write about before you actually begin writing. At least that's what I usually need to do, or I'm never going to get anything done. So Dr. Kozminski, when you start a writing project, do you typically begin with brainstorming, outlining, free writing? I know like a lot of research probably goes into it firsthand, but when you're actually getting down to the writing process, do you have anything like typical that you put on the page, or just begin writing?
I'll often just kind of begin writing. I'll start, again, with some of the data or some of the things I've been working on and kind of start in the middle and just start writing. But I often find that it's kind of going in every direction, and I have to kind of go back and, maybe outline or sketch out the flow. And writing a research piece is different than writing like a science policy piece, when you're really trying to frame the message first and then kind of back it up with information.
Okay, and Dr. Philippian, do you have anything to add to that? Like when you begin writing, do you actually brainstorm an outline, or do you just jump right in?
Well, I used to use outlines a lot more often than I do now. I used to outline papers and I would tape it to the wall in front of me, and then I would just more or less use that as the kind of skeletal structure. But these days when I sit down, I've already written portions of the paper in the margins of books and articles. That is a better process for me. And it's kind of interesting, actually, because I'll be 6 months down the road working on something else. I'll reach for a book I'd already cited somewhere, and I'll see, oh, here's that whole paper right here in miniature. And actually, some of this I don't even agree with right now. I might have done this differently. So I like to scratch out paragraphs and pages in the margins. And then on my notes, just on a separate piece of paper, I'll just have sketched out, see page 231 in Johnson. And then I go from there.
Yeah, I think I have a similar kind of process. Like I leave notes for myself in the margin of my document while I'm typing, or I highlight stuff that I know I need to go back into.
Yeah.
My outlines are just usually typically really, really messy, and I'll like put a couple words about a paragraph that I know I want to write, but I'm not ready to write yet. And that's kind of how my outlining, I guess, is, or brainstorming. But that's kind of what it looks like for me.
I think that's very effective, actually, because, the mind doesn't exactly lay things out in a clear chronology and linear movement all the time. And so you have to write what you can write, knowing that there's other portions you're sort of struggling with right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So for our next question, this will be just for the professors, Chris, so you can take a breather. But when it comes to your students starting a writing project, what advice do you give them when they're really struggling with starting out? Dr. Kozminski, why don't you start?
My piece of advice would be just write. Take whatever you're working on, whatever lab you're doing, whatever research you want to write on, and just kind of start fleshing things out and see where there are holes, see where you need to back things up with more evidence, and just get that page from a blank cursor to something.
Right. And Dr. Philippian, do you have anything to add?
I tell them much the same thing. What is it that you would like to say? Start there. And I'm available if you want to come into office hours, and we'll look it over, and I'll show you where certain things could be inserted. Or maybe there's this old saying in writing studies that the space between the end of one sentence and the start of the next is this kind of prosaic moment. And often the link between one sentence and another is missing. And so when I meet with students, I'll say, okay, here we need X, Y, and Z. And suddenly that paper starts to bloom, and they realize, okay, I am doing something real. I just was missing a few sutures. And so I help them that way. But yeah, just getting started is the key. And there are times when I will start myself and write a couple pages and think, that is not what I want to say. I got to redo this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that that's okay. I think a lot of students will begin writing a paper and start to hate it, and then they're like, I have to keep this because I've put so much effort into it. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Like, it's okay to try something else. Sometimes it is important to just like power through, but it is okay to try something else. So moving on to our next segment, after you begin, obviously comes the middle. So, Dr. Philippian, what challenges usually come up once a draft is underway, either for yourself or how you see in students?
Well, distraction, interruption, being called away to do some other task, which might be important, but it's getting in the way of the writing. And so I try to block out long periods of time. Tuesdays, for example, I'm not on campus and I'm writing. There's nobody there. It's just me and the dog, and that works pretty well.
Okay, Dr. Kozminski, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, distraction is definitely a big issue in the middle. You kind of gotten the framework down and you think it's moving in the right direction, and then you just kind of get distracted by everything because you don't want to put the time in to really finish it. But I'm also my own worst enemy sometimes in writing, and I'll find myself going back and editing and re-editing and doing that while I'm writing, which is terribly not productive. You can just kind of spiral, and I catch myself doing that
Yeah, for me,
more often than I want to.
Sorry. For me, I have a really bad habit of, if I have multiple things I'm writing, going back and forth between them and then not getting anything done for either of them because I'm just too distracted between all the information, and it just ends up not being productive. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to distraction, something that I usually do to sort of address it would just be to get my phone out of the room, because sometimes people are texting me and stuff like while I'm working, and then I'll have to go and I'll have to answer it because the phone's right there, and I can't say, oh, I didn't see it, because I did see it. but yeah, I mean, I'll remove everything that could be distracting sort of from the room and put myself like in a separate space, and that kind of allows me to focus.
That's a good idea. I should probably start doing that because I also get very distracted by my cell phone, even if it's on Do Not Disturb. So for this next question, I think all four of us might have something to say because it's about the sciences versus the humanities, and there's 2 versus 2. So when it comes to having that draft and like it being in the middle and like you're continuing to work on it, how might that situation differ between the sciences and the humanities? Because we get a lot of different students in the Writing Center, from nursing majors to English majors to, what are the airplane people?
Aviation.
Oh, yep. To aviation majors. So like we get everybody coming into the Writing Center with all different kinds of papers. So what might be like some differences or like important things that we should keep an eye out as mentors when it comes to those different disciplines? And Dr. Kaz, why don't you start?
I think in the sciences especially, is there kind of a logical flow to the paper? Do your conclusions make sense from your evidence? Just how is everything being tied together? And I think that's the place where students often struggle. You have a bunch of ideas down, but does one thing flow from the first piece to the next all the way through? So I think that's a challenge for a lot of students and for everybody who's writing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was not as different as I thought it was going to be. I don't know why I thought it would be some amazingly different thing. But great. Okay. Dr. Philippian, do you have anything to add?
Well, a little bit, I suppose, but I don't think it would be any different between the sciences and the humanities, quite honestly. Yes, there are times when we define what counts as evidence in slightly different ways, but then there are times when it's the same way. So it just depends on the nature of the project that we're working on. I do think it's important, and really I'm just echoing what Dr. Kozminski said, but I think it's important that readers can move from one stepping stone to the next in that article or that essay. And if you leave them stranded, that's a problem. And hopefully in the revision process, you catch that you've dropped a suture and they're not going to be able to continue. I think, too, your readers have to know what is at stake here. What is it that you're trying to show us? And why does it matter? It's that old so what question. So what that you see a parallel between text A and B? What does that mean? So we have to have that fronted Otherwise, it's very easy just to not keep reading, frankly.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I think you both like made really interesting points, and again, they're like totally connected, which I think is actually really good, because I think sometimes, especially when you're taking like your general ed courses and they're so different from what you want to do as your career, you might be intimidated by writing a paper for English when you're a mathematics major, but it is not any different than any other paper that you might write except for the content. So moving on to our next segment, we're going to be talking about revising and polishing. We've talked about this a couple times already in past episodes of the podcast and how it is an important part of the writing process. So Chris, why don't you start us off by telling us what the revision process looks like for you?
Okay, generally when I'm revising, I tend to have like a full paper out already. I am the kind of person who kind of revises as I go through and write, but usually I try my best to finish the full paper before I start revising. And then when it comes to the actual revision process, I try to focus a lot on that flow, making sure that each idea is sort of connected between like each point or piece of data. So the person who's reading never loses track of sort of what I'm talking about, you know?
Mm-hmm. I kind of have a similar process. Like I revise as I go, and flow is really important to me. It's something that like sticks out to me a lot if it's not going well in my own writing and other people's writing. And so I am like a perfectionist, I guess, when it comes to that. If I think one word is off, I'm like, I need to redo all these sentences like right now, which maybe isn't a great revision process step, but that's just how I do it. Dr. Kozminski, do you have anything about your revision process?
Mine sounds pretty similar. Yeah, I do revise as I go through, sometimes maybe too much. I think making sure the flow is there, but also I tend to focus a lot on the first paragraph in the abstract, if I'm writing a journal article, because you need that hook. You need to make people interested right away and let them know why what you're writing is important and why they should keep reading, because there's just so much out there in the literature. You want to kind of set your paper apart and say, this is why you should keep reading my paper.
Yeah, and I think that hook is so important, like you were saying. And I'm teaching in an 8th grade classroom right now, and we're teaching them how to do the hook. And I'm like, listen, you're going to be doing this forever, so you got to get used to it now. So, Dr. Philippian, do you have anything to add?
Sort of. I would say I try to divide my writing labor, divide it up so that it's kind of compartmentalized. So the first thing is I need a draft, like Chris was saying. I need a draft. And yeah, I'll monkey with words a little bit here and there, but not too much. And then once I get a draft, I'll go back through it a couple times, several times. And that helps me be productive and kind of get to the end, which is the most important, thing once you're well into it. And then, of course, you get the editor's comments back and you work on those. But thinking about it as a process is very important. It's not just a product, something that you write and turn in, and that's the end of it. Editors always come back with comments and questions, and it's never surprising, and it's always helpful. So,
yeah, I think the peer review and editing process is a really important part of the revision as well. It's another set of eyes, right? It shows you where the holes are, where you need to patch things up in your writing.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely agree with that. That's something that I tell a lot of the students that come into the writing center, is that sometimes like they'll come in with like something that's really good already, and I'll be like, I know you've been looking at this for weeks and weeks. So sometimes you just need that second opinion to reassure you that you're like, oh, actually, yeah, I did do that. Like, that looks good. So moving on to our next question, the big question I feel like a lot of students might have. When do you know that you're done? Like, when do you know that everything is finished? You can turn it in or submit it or do whatever you need to do with that piece of writing. When are you finished? And Dr. Philippian, why don't you start us off with that?
That is a good question. I would say for me, and this is for my students too, frankly, when I feel that I've a strong draft, but I know there might be some lingering questions, maybe a gap or two here and there in the argument, I just send it off. I just figure, well, editors this is their job at this point. I don't really have much more that I can I can say, but I know there might be some rough spots. And then they come back to me and they've identified the rough spots and they've got a couple of suggestions. I work on that, and that's it. So with students, when they come in with a draft, that's how we work. I will read it over. I'll make some comments. I'll say, here's a rough spot. Maybe you think about X, Y, and Z. Here's why. They go back, they revise, and that's the process.
Right. And Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of look at it as like a, cost to benefit ratio, where sort of the amount of time that you're putting in to make like marginal improvements is no longer worth like the amount of improvements that you're sort of getting. Also, when the deadline comes, that's usually
yeah, that's probably good to consider.
Good. Yeah.
That is good to consider, unless it's pushed back. And then you have more time to work.
Yeah.
More pressure. Dr. Kozminski, do you have anything to add?
No, I totally agree with the deadline. That's very helpful when writing. And sometimes I'll just like put in my calendar, here's the deadline, kind of wherever it is. You try to get it as good as you can. But in my mind, the process is never done, which means that I sit there and I agonize over things for too long when I really just need to get it out. And and let the feedback come from the peer review so that you can finish it up.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm similar in that way that I agonize as well. Like I still think about papers that I've turned in like months ago, and I'm like, I could have done that so much better. That would have been like life-changing if I did it that way. It's really bad because I should probably think about what I'm currently working on, but that's okay.
I don't think your professors are thinking, that could have been life-changing for Shannon. if just one more paragraph on this.
Well, you never know. All right, so we're going to move on now to our next segment, which is like our quick round. So I want each guest to share at least one piece of advice that they wish all students knew about writing. And Dr. Kozminski, I want you to start us off.
Sure. I'll give two very quick things. I'll say first, just write, just get it started and write.
Yeah.
And then, for the students especially, use the resources that you have around you. The writing center, your professors, check in from time to time. And I was not paid by the writing center to say that.
Thank you. Chris?
Don't be afraid to read aloud because it kind of helps find like the smaller mistakes,
Yeah, I agree. I've started actually recording myself read my papers and listening to it, and I'm like, oh, I need to change that because it sounds awkward. Mm-hmm. But it's actually very helpful. And Dr. Philippian?
Well, I agree with all that's been said so far. The reading aloud thing is very important and highly underestimated in terms of its value. The ear is better than the eye. I'll say that as an editing, organ? Is that correct? Anyway, the one bit of advice that I would give all students is don't too closely identify with the paper. So if somebody comes along and they read the draft and they have comments, they are not commenting on you as a human being or the value of your life or who you are. They're commenting on that document, that text, those words, the sequence in which they occur, and they're trying to help you make it more clear. But they are in no way attacking you. But it's hard. We often very closely identify with what we've produced on the page. And so a little bit of distance is very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice. I think students, especially when they spend a lot of time with a paper, it does become like an extension of themselves. And then when they get the feedback or advice, they're like, well, I don't want to like change that because I worked really hard on that. And it's like, okay, but we're trying to help you, benefit you. So like, you don't have to take the advice, but it might be good to consider. All right, now we're going to move on to our weekly segment. We do this every week, the Word of the Week segment. And Josh is going to give us a word without the definition, and we will have to guess its meaning. And hopefully we will get it correct. So take it away, Josh.
I'm going to have to share Chris's mic here. All right, so the word of the week is sonder.
Can I have the... Don't give the mic back to him. You need to give me the meaning, or not the meaning.
That's what you're trying to do.
That's
You're trying to guess the meaning. You want the origin, or
Yeah.
you want it in a sentence?
The origin, a sentence, all of it. I
All
wanna
right.
hear it.
So this was coined in 2012 by writer John Koenig in his blog, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. It's partly from French, German, and Latin.
So he made it up.
Can it be used in a sentence?
Yes. So, in a state of Sonder, each of us is at once a hero, a supporting cast member, and an extra in overlapping stories.
I guess it's not wondering about sounds, which was my initial guess.
Right, yeah.
So is it an emotion?
Yeah, it's a feeling.
Hope?
Not hope. No.
Is it
Dang it.
is it the feeling that we occupy different identities all at the same time?
Like one person having multiple identities?
Yeah.
No.
How dare you?
You really
sir.
like
No.
you kind of led into that like you were gonna be like correct.
I was just confirming, like, I understood what you meant.
I just wanted to
Multiple
make
people
sure he was
having
wrong.
multiple identities?
Because it was unclear.
I have a guess. Is it like one person possessing multiple like emotions at the same time?
No, we already did a word like that.
No. Dang.
Can I
True, but-
can I ask a follow-up question? Do you have a good word?
No,
a good
Josh.
word
Josh
in there?
specially picked this word out for you guys.
Sonder.
I've been saving this for weeks.
All right, I think I give up.
Can we call a friend?
Sam,
Sam, do you have any ideas?
I was wondering, is it like, I don't know, like content or something? Or Josh, just say yes.
I'm
Maybe.
throwing in the towel,
No.
Josh.
All right. Any last guesses from the professors?
Can I hear the sentence one more time?
In a state of Sonder, each of us is at once a hero, a supporting cast member, and an extra in overlapping stories.
It's like a part of life.
It does have to do with life, yes.
And it isn't that we occupy different subject positions all at the same time?
Having multiple roles.
In a sense, yes, but it's also not solely focused on yourself.
All right, Josh, why don't you give us the definition?
So the feeling one has on realizing that every other individual one sees has a life as full and real as one's own.
Oh, that's
Oh.
hogwash. I don't think that's true at
It's a
all.
good. I am a dictionary, and that's
Wow,
in
that's
there.
a good
Yeah.
word.
I've actually had that feeling before.
Yeah, right.
Josh picks such good words every week. We never know them.
How is it spelled, just so I know?
Sonder.
Okay. Very good word.
Okay, thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Before we close today's episode, I want to remind our listeners that the Writing Center is here to support you through every stage of the writing process. You can make an appointment by visiting My Lewis and clicking the WC Online tab underneath Advising and Academic Support. You can also visit our online writing lab by visiting lewisu.edu/writing center. I also want to mention that while our fall events have wrapped up, we've got more helpful workshops coming your way in the spring semester. Keep an eye out for upcoming sessions to get helpful tips on writing and writing formats. These workshops are great opportunities to build your skills in a relaxed, supportive environment, and we'd love to see you there. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in this week, and of course, a big thank you to my guests for joining me in today's conversation. I encourage you to keep writing, keep revising, and never be afraid to reach out for help along the way. As we head into finals, we want to wish you the best of luck. You've got this. And from all of us here at the Writing Center, happy holidays, and we hope you have a restful, well-deserved winter break. This has been Go With The Flow. Until next time.